Hi, I'm Namrata, and this is MedTech Juju, where we're going to talk about all things MedTech. So sign up and enjoy the ride.
Let's begin now.
You know, today, I just woke up and I
Like
said,
this.
you know, instead of waiting on a good day, waiting around through ups and downs, waiting on something to happen, I just said,
We're gonna have a good day, and all my homies gonna ride today.
that's right.
And all these mommies look fly today, and all we wanna do is get by today.
Hi, I'm
Have a
Namrata,
good day.
dentist, startup executive, and founder of Naminar Pro. This is MedTech Juju. Hey, MedTech world. Let's talk about the risk classes of medical devices today. Whenever you start working at a medical device company, you have to first and foremost know what risk class the device that they're developing is. Is it class 1? Is it class 2? Or is it class 3? If you're working in the States, that's usually the classification used. But in Europe, you might have to subgroup it into class 2A or class 2B. Depends. Usually around the world, medical devices are classified as low risk, medium risk, high risk, class 1, 2, 3. But it's hard to say that this is the standard classification system for all medical devices throughout the world. Usually, each country has its own system or regulation that they follow on how to classify their devices. But for our discussion today, let's talk about the three basic category of risk classes. Class 1 is low risk devices. Low risk devices are usually the ones where manufacturers could self-certify. They don't essentially have to go to regulatory authorities to validate the device to get market approval, except for certain cases. But broadly speaking, class 1 means lowest risk, so therefore may or may not need a regulatory authority's approval. Class 1 device examples, Band-Aids, glasses. Class 2 is medium risk. Now, in Europe, for example, you might have low medium risk, that's class 2A, or you might have medium high risk, that's class 2B. Class 2A examples could be sutures, dental fillings, or disposable contact lenses. Class 2B examples could be wound dressings, dental implants, incubators. Class 3 would include high-risk devices. So that could be, catheters, stents, cardiovascular devices. So what is the process that a medical device follows when it's being developed? I like to call them as different stages of development. So stage 1 would usually be the ideation stage. It's essentially the initiation or the opportunity stage in which you come up with the idea for your dental device. What does stage 1 involve? At this stage, you're planning the development of your device. And keep in mind, most manufacturers need to document this plan. Everything needs to be documented. When you are in a medical device company, everything needs to be documented. In this first stage, you might be thinking, what kind of markets do I want to approach? Where would my device sell well? Where is the key market currently for our competitor devices? So this is a little bit of market research that starts going in at stage 1. And most importantly, if you know you have a plan, if you have the design of your idea ready, you first apply for an IP, intellectual property. Secure your idea first. During that market analysis, you might also want to see stage 1. You also, during your market analysis, could look into what is the most similar device to my idea. Usually it works the other way around. So the person who comes up with the idea of a new device has already seen or used or worked in the scope of a very similar device in the past. So if clinicians come up with the idea, it's because they've used a very similar device and they know the deficiencies in that existing device and they want to develop something better. That's when a clinician starts a company or a medical device company, because they've used it so much, they know precisely what the missing gaps are that they want to fulfill with their idea. Or you might be an engineer who's developed certain kinds of devices over the years, And you already know that all those devices are not filling that critical gap which you have now come up with, and you want to take your venture on your own and build this device with this gap being filled up with your unique idea. You can also be a master's student in engineering and you've come up with a concept which fits a certain industry in the medical device sector well. So you take your thesis into a startup and you start developing your device. Whatever category you fall under, the first step is to look into the market. What's the most similar device? Start deconstructing it. That's what engineers do. And they reverse engineer it, and then they build theirs from the ground up. All of this work is being done at stage 1, during the market analysis stage and the ideation stage. One of the things to keep in mind is that if you are in fact a early stage company or a startup, then there's a very high chance that most of you are engineers, and there's very little clinical input to your ideation stage. So you're building your idea from the ground up, but don't have access to a lot of clinicians who can actually come in and pitch in to that idea that you have. And usually it's a good idea to have clinicians right at the get-go so that you have a good understanding of where that idea is headed towards when it comes to adoption at the end stage by the end user. Ideally, if you are along this journey, you're also starting to think about your company. And each company, like I mentioned, when you're in that ideation stage, you want to start documenting things. And that usually comes under the quality system for that company. So the earlier you can start thinking about setting up a QMS, or a quality management system, there's a standard that's followed in the medtech space. In Europe, it's called ISO 13485, and in the States, it's different. There are standards that are followed to set up this QMS depending on which region you're setting up your company in. And it's usually a good idea to start thinking about your quality management system right at the get-go. You're going to hear most people hear a lot of different kinds of advice that, get your IP in place first. Set up your quality system first. Think about your regulatory plan already. It's a confusing world. Each step is equally important, but at some point, things need to be organized and structured in a way that makes sense. None of the steps, though, need to be skipped. Phase 2 is usually the feasibility of the concept. So if in phase 1 you haven't gotten enough clinicians to chip in on the idea, you might want to do it at stage 2. Because here is where you're getting end user needs and you're understanding if your idea would even work by talking to clinicians. And even if you're a clinical practitioner yourself, it's still very advisable that you reach out to a large cohort of clinicians in your space to get an objective opinion rather than a single subjective one. This is usually the voice of the customer. So this is usually the voice of your end user that you're capturing in stage 2. What exactly are the end user needs? You can also do an early concept selection. At this stage, most engineers are already thinking about making a prototype. And if you are able to make a prototype for your idea, whether it be a software tool or whether it be a software as a medical device or an actual physical device which you've 3D printed, it's a good idea to have that prototype ready after you've taken the input from the end user and then show that prototype either to the same users or a new cohort, a fresh cohort that hasn't participated in any of the processes before, just to get maximum inputs from maximum people. So prototype analysis is something that you address in stage 2. In this stage, you're also starting to think about your design history file, or the DHF. And this is a very, very important document that stores within it the journey that you are taking during the development of your idea. And this thing is going to keep building over the years, but it's critical to establish it as soon as possible. You also want to think about the risk management. At this stage, we're thinking about what risk is my device, what risk class. Usually you already know the risk class in stage 1, but now you're really think about the risk of your device because you've added certain features to it. Is that changing your risk classification? How much is it less risky than the competitor, or did it become more risky because of your idea? Has it become more technical? Is it more work compared to what the competitor was doing? So these are the kind of questions that you start asking yourself at stage 2. What is the actual risk and how are we planning to mitigate that risk in the future? And in the medical device industry, you have standards which help you navigate that thought process of defining and understanding risks, hazard, harms, etc. One of those standards is ISO 14971, which is the risk management standard. So in stage 2, you've kind of defined your initial risk management strategy and also your regulatory strategy. So you've already got an idea of here is the first market I want to approach with this device, or here are the first 2 markets I usually want to approach. The key part about stage 2 is that you want to get the feedback from the end user at the ideation stage, but also after you've built your first prototype, immediately after that, either from the same group or a completely different group or both. That's critical so that you know that this is the prototype that we will move forward with, or we still need to make a few changes before we move on to stage 3. Now you've advanced along your device's journey and you've reached stage 3, which is the verification and validation stage. So by this stage, you have a prototype which you've run past enough end users in your market research process. They've gone through your prototype, you have the inputs, you've adapted your prototype, and now you're feeling pretty confident that, okay, I have a prototype now that I want to proceed to the next stage. So by stage 3, you have a confident prototype. And this is where you would start thinking about the verification and validation of your device. The verification and validation stage is an intense part of a device's development process, and it's also time consuming because there's a whole bunch of things that need to be done during this stage. So the verification and validation stage is a little heavy in terms of time and money, because now you are testing your prototype in the labs, sending it to third-party independent vendors who are now taking your device and testing every aspect of it, following very specific standards to your specific chosen device. And they're running lab tests which have to be done. There's no way around it. It is a requirement by the regulations. Every medical device needs to have a verification and validation, which is a series of lab tests that need to be done at certain independent parties. This can also include the biocompatibility testing for your device. And you might also at stage 3 start thinking about animal testing, because it's preclinical stage. So you're thinking about running preclinical studies with key opinion leaders who are up there in the preclinical testing research area for that given device. And now you're contacting them, telling them about your product, showing them your prototype, and asking them to run these studies in their labs for you. And usually at this stage, you have key opinion leaders who are very adept at running specific kinds of studies with that given kind of device, tool, or material, whatever your case is. And they run independent assessments in their labs. Again, at stage 3, you're continuing with your customer evaluation, because you always want to show your prototype to as many clinical practitioners so that you get as much input before you reach something called a design freeze stage. You also need to track how you're converting your customer feedback into actual engineering requirements. All of that goes into your risk management process, your design history file. Everything is being documented. But it helps to put in that effort at this stage rather than get rude surprises when you've already released the device into the market, only to realize that it had many deficiencies, which could have been addressed at the design and development stage or the validation stage. Then you have stage 4, where you are doing your final adaptation of the device. You've got enough input, you're confident about your design of the device, you've passed your biocompatibility testing, you've passed your verification validation stage, and now you're really starting to convert that prototype into an actual device. At this stage, you are compiling your design history file, which is very heavy by this point because of all the work you've done around your device. You're making your regulatory submissions, you have an actual device ready, you're preparing your regulatory dossier, you need a bunch of medical writers to jump in and write those documents for you at this stage. You're also thinking about clinical studies. So because now you have passed biocompatibility, verification, validation, you want to now test it on humans. And in order to do that, you have to design a protocol and follow the whole process that goes into designing a clinical study and running it. A good standard to follow for this is the ISO 14155. The marketing team is pitching in now because they already know that, from X months, you're going to be launching your device pretty soon. So marketing teams are already thinking about a launch plan, how you want to release that device. And now the company is thinking about scaling up. So what's your scaling up strategy? Who are you going to approach for distributing your device? And the management or the board is now heavy in these kind of discussions just to make sure that the device gets the best launch possible and is able to be distributed properly in the markets that you want to target. You're doing shipping trials at this stage. You're testing the shipment. How will it be stored? Your storage requirements. And you're doing everything. It's reaching towards the end now. And then you have stage 5, which is the launch of your device, and also considering the post-launch activities. So by this stage, you've got the necessary approvals that you needed to sell your device in the given market. You have a launch plan in place. You're ready to release your device into the market. And you've already thought about the post-market activities, which means how am I going to capture the complaints? Do I have a system in place to make sure that I'm capturing those complaints? And keep in mind that the moment your device gets launched and it's being sold to actual people, you're going to start getting a lot of feedback. And that means you're going to have to update your design. And that means you're going to start thinking about the next version of your device, because you're going to start capturing what is working and what isn't. And you're now planning the next stage for your device's development already. But make sure that you have a system in place to capture. That is also required by the law. And regulatory authorities usually need to see that system in place even before they give you the approval to launch the device. And that's basically it. So in these 5 stages, I've broadly covered key aspects that go into the ideation of a device to post-market, and all the different players involved. You have clinical teams, regulatory teams, marketing teams, sales teams, and everybody else on the outside, which are the labs that need to run the tests for you, the verification, validation, the biocompatibility. And when all of this work is done, finally, you have a product that you can call your own, which is your medical device. I hope this video was useful for you. If you want to see more videos around clinical investigation, regulatory submissions, then follow this channel, and I'll see you around. Ciao. I'm Dr. Namrata. I've worked as a clinician, I've worked as an external consultant in the medical device industry, and I've worked inside manufacturing firms, and now I have my own company. We're not building medical devices, but we're supporting medical device manufacturers. I made this channel because a lot of the times, people who are coming into the industry are rarely trained about what exactly this industry entails. Whether you're a clinician that's interested in supporting corporate work, or whether you're a university graduate, or somebody who's transitioning industry from pharma to medical devices, doesn't matter what boat you're on, it's essential to understand how the medical device industry works. And this channel essentially is dedicated to help you understand that. So I hope you enjoy the content and subscribe to the channel if you want to follow more such things. Let's go.